Hello and welcome everyone to Sales Intel and Aspire's session 2 of 3 for our blueprint for higher performing ABM campaigns. Today's session is all around how to build compelling content. And with you today, you have myself, Ariana Shannon, the marketing director here at Sales Intel. I've been in startups and I've been in SaaS my entire career, and I'm really excited to start working with a lot of data that Sales Intel provides in our campaigns, but then also understanding how data is impactful across all kinds of strategies, and especially with ABM as well. And with us, we have the wonderful Andrew Rupert from Aspirant, our wonderful director of digital marketing and communications over there. Andrew has more words today. Andrew, I know you've got more than, you've got over a decade of experience is what I'm trying to say. You're a really smart guy. You've got a lot of information in the B2B and B2C marketing experience. You've led strategies for companies like Heinz, Valvoline, and just a lot of other organizations. So just take another second and introduce yourself for us.
Sure. Yeah. So got a lot of experience, like you say, in B2B and B2C, specifically in CPG for companies like the ones you mentioned. These days, I'm managing marketing for Aspirant, and we are a management and technology consulting company. We do things a little bit differently than the bigger firms you might be more familiar with. We're the same level of talent and subject matter experts, but we have integrated expertise and we deliver with much smaller, agile teams. So in short, we're able to do things better, faster, and cheaper for our clients.
Awesome. Absolutely. Which is what part of the reason we wanted to partner with you in the series that we're doing, because there's so much around ABM, especially for anyone that's tried to do it. You really can't tackle all of it in one go. So the previous session was around targeting. So you'll have access to that in the recaps, but today we're going to be focusing around engagement. And if you guys find some value, we hope that you'll join us in October for our third and final installment of the series. So with that, let's go ahead and get into today's agenda. So overall, going to be talking about these 4 components. How do you make targets relatable? How do you figure out what they need? How do you get their attention? And then, of course, how do you actually reach these people? And how do you just make everything go and make the engagement rise? So with Andrew, I'll pass it back over to you.
Sure. So first off is, how do you make these targets relatable? And one of the really important things that we really recommend to our clients and do for ourselves is taking the time to build a persona. So there's different ways of doing this, but our general framework is a few different steps here. So first off, who are they? It really helps to make things tangible if you give them a photo, give them a name, just make them sort of start building these little components like it's somebody you know. You want to build it around a certain theme, basically about what kind of summarizes what these people are looking for. And you kind of talk about where are they in life? What's their outlook? Here we have an example of Ray. He's a CTO for the state of Montana. He's been working there for 10 years, et cetera, et cetera. Just a quick breakdown to kind of make things more relatable and tangible is really what we're working towards. Then what's their story? So what are they looking for? What are they up against? And generally, what are they looking for as kind of completing this whole story and creating the opportunity for yourself and what you're looking to offer?
Yeah, absolutely. Because the persona is not so much for that end person, but it's for us. It's for us to build that messaging of what makes sense. So whenever we're sitting there trying to put together an ad campaign or put together an email or a larger ABM campaign, it's okay, do I think this is going to resonate with it? You can always come back to the personas as the source of truth to answer those questions.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a really important piece is having those personas solidified and aligned upon. And that's actually the first of the next step of where we would go from here. So you made them relatable. You kind of understand what Ray's looking for. How do we come into his life? How are we relevant? But how do you figure out exactly what they need in a more specific way? So we use journey mapping as a way to analyze their experience and target key pain points. There's a lot of moving pieces here. We'll talk about them. We'll show examples. We're going to talk each of the steps through the way. So first off is going to be citing that persona. So you can confirm. You're going to confirm alignment on that persona with the team. Make sure everybody's input is reflected in that final persona. And like Ariana said, that's going to become your source of truth. You can keep going back to that to make sure that all along the way, you're remaining true to that persona for the journey map that corresponds to that specific one.
Yep.
Yep. Then from there, you want to identify the relevant phases. Break down each phase of any interaction between your company and that persona. What are the gives and takes, and we'll kind of dig our way down into the details from here on out. Then for each of those relevant phases, what is that person doing during those interactions? Just kind of what are the mechanisms? What are they trying to accomplish? And in each of these stages, how are they thinking and feeling as they go about the actions and kind of the give and take between us and them? What's their emotional response? What's their intellectual response? What's going through their head? And then business objectives. So for each of these phases, you've got this individual doing different things, thinking and feeling. What are we as a business trying to accomplish in each of those phases? So we can kind of correspond those two. And by tying those together, we can identify the moments that matter and brainstorm on ways to pursue objectives, create value for that individual persona at each different piece of that journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Because the alignment is key. Having this alignment at the very top that you were talking about, that everyone understands and agrees what this is, because it's all various departments and people working together to make ABM possible. And ABM really is, I've heard a lot of other people talk about it as a custom built marketing plan for specific industries or for verticals or for specific personas even. They'll break it down into a thinnest slice as possible. Now, not everyone's able to do that, but if you can identify all of the elements that Andrew was just talking about, and especially in what are they doing and how are they feeling, you can tap into that emotional response to gain that engagement.
Absolutely. And the level of granularity that you get into by decomposing all of these can really focus your efforts on how can we make a difference for them while trying to still pursue our business objectives along the way.
Absolutely. So
a quick example here, very rudimentary, but we do have a template that's available on our website and we can send along with this summary deck. But we have a kind of framework. This is how we would kind of visualize it. So in this case, this is a journey map for someone going to a car mechanic, right? So step one is that site persona. Up here in the left, you see this woman. She's a single 30-year-old working woman. She owns a small luxury SUV. She needs some work done on her car. So that's kind of establishing the persona so that we know who we're talking about here. And then step two are these different phases. Basically, very, very simple here, before, during, and after the work that's happening on their car. So then we get into what are they doing? Really quickly, they see the warning light, they find a mechanic, they take it in, and then in the end, they're kind of seeing that their car is in good shape and reliable going forward. So that's what they're doing. So what are they thinking and feeling? You have some quote bubbles here that you might start to throw some thoughts out there that kind of summarize each kind of interaction here. And then along here, you see kind of a trend line of how they're emotionally feeling. People don't really enjoy taking their car to the mechanic, so they're kind of below the middle line there. But this starts to show you the fluctuations and how people are feeling along the way. And then number 5 here, this is where we call out the business objectives. So this is where we kind of shift gears from what are they thinking into how do we fit into this whole puzzle? And then step 6 is aligning those pieces. We think about what the customer is looking to do, how they're thinking and feeling, what are our business objectives in each of those little compartments along the way. This is where we can find gems, the ways that we can create value, differentiate ourselves from the competition as well.
No, absolutely. And I love the journey that you've been able to share with it, because a lot of this feels so strategic in our heads. As soon as you get something on paper or digitally on paper, you can start to think more critically about it because you don't have to try to remember all of the steps of the process. So thank you so much for sharing the journey and making it available to everyone here.
Absolutely. And this can really be a great reference internally to your manager, to your team, or if you're working with any creative agencies, this could be a really great reference, the persona plus these journey maps to say, hey, here's the game plan. It's all based on this. And I'm going, again, establish these as sources of truth for any campaigns that you're building out from here.
Mhm.
So the next step is, how do you get their attention? We've kind of defined who they are. We've made them relatable. What are they looking to find? What are their needs? Now it's how do we get their attention? And this is the approach that we use. I found really useful in my career. It's called a task map exercise. So basically, when we talk about all those pieces we already have in place, what are the communication points that we need to have to make it compelling? And we'll talk about these different components along the way here. So first off is just, again, citing that reference. The persona we've already talked about. The target, we can talk about company targeting details. There's a lot of different ways to do that. And then the offering, what are you selling? What are you trying to promote? What are you trying to give to them to satisfy their needs? And then what is that need? What's the need state for this person? What are their pain points? And whenever they encounter these pain points, how are they acting? What are they doing? And what do they believe that's leading them to act in that way? So those two are very tightly correlated. And then on the other side, how do we want them to act? And how do they have to be thinking in order for them to act in that manner? So then what's the barrier? What's the barrier from current, how they're thinking and acting, to how we'd like them to think and act? What's anchoring them to what they're doing today? What sort of perceptions or facts that they hold as truths that's keeping them where they are and preventing them from changing the way they think and act? And then that really outlines the task. So how do we get around that barrier? What's the task? What's the convincing? What are the perceptions that we need to break to be able to get them around that barrier and thinking the way that we'd like them to? So a lot of this makes a lot more sense when you see it in a true example. So we'll include this one with this deck. We don't need to really go through step by step, but you can see here how this might be populated for Ray, the value maximizer, the company targeting details, the offering, and then all of the moving pieces when we talk to them about someone that could help them get more value out of their Salesforce instance. It really helps for the future beliefs to phrase them as quotes, to really summarize just the mentality of how that person is kind of viewing things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then I thinking about this more holistically as well, because I was checking out all the people who registered today, and I know we have a very large amount of marketers, which is fantastic. We get to talk to fellow colleagues, but kind of stepping out of my marketing lens for just a second, when you're looking at the barriers and the tasks, that for me is another word for objection. What are the things that your sales org is going to have to overcome, and how can we help prepare them for that? Because if we're cognizant of that from the get-go, and then we communicate with the sales team to really do some marketing, or maybe you've heard ABX, like it is an ABS or an ABM or an ABX all together, to really make it strong throughout the entire journey of the prospect.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So pass it back over to Ariana here for intent.
Absolutely. So we've talked about how to get them engaged, how to make them relatable to us, how to start to get them to engage, but then how do you actually reach these people? Not just in the sense of sales intel and that we provide B2B contact data, we got the accurate data, but how do you prioritize all of these people? I know a conversation that we were having earlier this year of like, wow, we've got all these accounts that we really, really want to reach out to. Okay, but that's a lot to do all at once. And especially with some ABM campaigns, I know that some people have them in shorter time spans. Sometimes they can run a very long time. So how do you realize that it's impactful? Well, a way of doing that is actually by leveraging some intent data. And this really does come down to best practices with ABM. If you have not heard of intent data or you haven't started using it, I highly recommend, because what intent data does is it's the buyer intent. It says, hey, these organizations are showing some pain. They're showing a spike in pain that they're having. And it allows you to say, oh, this organization is showing that it's already warm. Let me pass that into the appropriate channels. So instead of having to nurture a cold organization that you're reaching out to, those in some strategies, you can do like a little bit of an email warm up, or you can send them directly to your sales team. And I have a quick example of what that might look like for the salesperson of just like day one, you kind of identify what that signal is. So depending on the type of intent data you're using, and I'll keep going along that route of whether it's just buyer intent of you're noticing that like, hey, Acme Corp is now surging on information security. Okay, I'm an information security company. Maybe this is a great time for me to reach out to them. That's kind of that broader spectrum. But then you have competitor signals. So that would say that Acme Corp is looking at one of my competitors. They definitely want to talk to someone. I want to be in on this conversation. You can get that through some buyer intent elements. I know that's something that Sales Intel does offer, or you can take it one step further and go into like the G2s, the trust radiuses, the crowdsourcing elements of the world to say, okay, these people did a direct comparison. I definitely need to be talking to them. And it really, again, plays all into that. How do you take all this information, all of this forethought of things that you know are going to reach engagement, but then accelerate the timeline of your ABM campaign? The other bonus of this is things like visitor intelligence or visitor intel. You may have also heard of this as like web revealing, or basically getting more insight onto who's visiting your website. So there are some strategies that you can use where you take this information and you put it on like your bottom of the funnel pages. And from there, I can say, all right, these people came to the website. Great. Let me flip this over and run all of those companies through our ideal customer profile or targeting account system, however you refer to it, to say, okay, of all these companies that came here, these ones fit. All right, this is great. They were on my page and they didn't fill out a form. I want to talk to them as well. So there are all these varying levels of intent data that you can average, or that you can leverage within your campaign from a marketing standpoint or from that sales standpoint as well. Going back to our day-by-day example of identifying what kind of intent signal that was, using the information that you have about the persona, maybe having your salesperson reach out on LinkedIn, maybe giving them a call to follow up what they found was interesting. And honestly, all of these can become their own plays within the ABM strategy as well. I'll just take a pause, Andrew, let you jump in on that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I did want to throw out that I had no idea, never heard of intent data before we signed on with Sales Intel. It's really what is the key to getting away from the spray and pray and the enabler for true ABM campaigns. There's 8,500 plus topics that are available for filtering within the Sales Intel platform, which really gives you the insight into who's going to care what I have to say. And by narrowing it really down right at the outset, it just gives you such an advantage to be able to be so much more effective and efficient with your outreach. So it really blew my mind when I saw this was available, and we've incorporated it into our outreach since then.
No, awesome. Yeah, visitor intel is probably my favorite thing ever. It takes this retargeting bullseye across your entire org, and especially in ABM, and makes it so much smaller to say, all right, this is the impactful, this is what I can move forward with. So awesome. Making sure I didn't have any questions around intent data, because I know I'm so used to talking about it and want to make sure I didn't throw any weird acronyms out there. But yeah, otherwise that takes us all the way to the end of what does this all depend on, and bringing it all together. Generating engagement from your audience really depends on the alignment of all of your components. And it starts there. How are you, not only as a marketer within your team, but as an organization, what is the growth and what is that together strategy? Also go on to our next one of where are you focusing those efforts? You've got a lot of different segmentation going down. And that really is a way of saying, okay, going back to those slices, really breaking everything down to where it makes sense, creating those personas, and making sure that you're moving forward. Then you have what companies fit the profile. So understanding how you're wanting to grow, where you need to be focusing your efforts and your targeting, but then also who fits that target, and how, and actually even a step further, how many organizations are in that target? Does that make sense for you to start the campaign? Because if ever you're going to do something and it's already that small, it makes it fantastic. But then sometimes, and more often, the issue is, wow, there's a lot of companies. How can we narrow this down to like the best fit possible? And then of course, whose needs are we addressing? Those personas. What are their barriers? What motivates them? What is keeping them up at night? How can you make their lives easier? How can you make them the heroes of their own story? And then which needs are most relevant. It goes back to the journey mapping component that Andrew was talking about. And again, you guys are going to have access to that template in the recap tomorrow. So if you didn't get your screenshots, don't worry, you'll be able to have access to that. But yeah, going through of what are the tasks and how can we motivate all of these elements? And then who are those individuals? So taking it all the way down from this broad account and company view to the personas that you understand, but even making that further to what are the titles? Who are the actual individuals that I need to be reaching out to? Who are my decision makers? Who are my influencers? Who's going to be the champion at the organization? And of course, who's already showing interest, and probably the most impactful from my lens of who's already ripe for the picking and who is going to move through that funnel much more quickly than all the rest combined.
Yeah, and I just wanted to oh, sorry, go ahead. One more first. Go ahead.
Oh, all good. And then what do you need to tell them, of course, once you've kind of got their interest, you've identified their interest, and then what do you actually need to say in those conversations, and how can you motivate them through?
I was just going to layer on that this seems like a lot of steps, a lot of time, maybe through some people's perception, wasted in really going through all of this rigor and getting all this input from not only yourself, but any of your colleagues that are involved in this planning process before you can really start to kind of make headway. But I would challenge that kind of thought process, because this is actually going to help you be more efficient and waste a whole lot less time down the road talking to people who don't care, talking to the wrong people. So all of this, all this effort and time invested is going to really pay off and pay its dividends down the road.
No, absolutely. And then even taking that the step further, because especially in my career, I've known we've tried things and we're like, okay, that's not working, pivot. And that's what happens. And when you have something that's already been this well thought through, it's not wasted effort. You're able to go back and be more surgical in what happened, what can we tweak? And you can be much more data-driven and much more intelligence-based than kind of feeling like you're shooting in the dark. So yeah. All right. Anything else you want to add in there?
No, I think we covered it.
All right. Well, then we definitely want everyone to join us for the final session of our 3-part series of the measurement of the ABM campaigns and how to generate sustainable results. That's going to be in October. I hope that you guys get to join us, because it goes back to all the time that you put into building your target accounts, building these personas, starting to get the engagement. But then if you don't know what's working, and if you're not measuring it, then you don't know how to accelerate it. So we hope you guys are going to join us then. But for now, we're going to open the floor up to questions. So please feel free to start popping those in the chat or in the QA, and we'll go through as many as we can. All right, give everyone a little second.
Yeah, I also we should have mentioned on that recap slide, Ariana, those bullets that we listed kind of incorporates what we talked about in the first session as well. So all of those different components, there's maybe 8 or 9 different bullets there. Really takes us back through the prior session too. So those of you that are joining us for 2 but not number 1, you might want to go back so you can get a little bit of background on those pieces as well.
Excellent. And we actually already have someone asking, where can I find the detail for the next event? I love that. We're going to send that out to you as soon as it is ready. There's a couple just fine tuning we want to do before we get that published, but you guys will have access to that as soon as possible because you registered for this event. You'll get a special email from us. And then we have a question from Marcy of, what source are you using for intent data? And honestly, Marcy, the answer for that for me is all of the above. I want to be able to leverage as much intent data as possible. And since Sales Intel is a B2B data provider and actually a sales intelligence platform, we drink our own champagne and we use our own intent data. Oh, and we've got 2 in the QA. Let's see. Andrew, thanks for the chat. What if we've gone through these steps and are still not getting results? Is that indicative of a lack of product market fit or something else? It's a great question.
It's a really great question, Santiago. That would be my suspicion as well. There's a disconnect, again, a very hypothetical question, but I would suspect that there is that disconnect between the offering that you're putting out there and the receptiveness and the need in the marketplace. So in that instance, that I would look for trying to do some market research to kind of reacclimate yourself with what is really needed out in the marketplace versus what we're offering, and trying to make sure that that continuity is maintained and see if there's any tweaks or revisions to either the way that that product or service is being created or the way it's being presented to the market.
Excellent. All right, we've got another question in here. How many times should I contact a lead on an ABM email campaign? I don't want to be a spam, in all caps. I love that. But I definitely want an answer. And honestly, to whoever asked that one, I think SalesLoft came out with some metrics of it takes at least like 7 to 10 touches to just get someone to respond to you. So there's definitely a difference between diligent outreach and being a spam. And all of it has to do with, there are some timing components. Please don't send your person an email every day. That's a bit overkill, but a lot of it has to do with the content. Even if they're not ready to purchase from you, if you are providing valuable content and you are actually trying to understand and address the points and the problems that they have, it's going to be seen less as spam. So with that, I would say, how many times should you contact a lead? As many makes sense for the amount of messaging that you have, the amount of pains that they have, and how that is layered in with the other multi-touch elements that you're doing. I'd highly encourage everyone to do multi-touch and multi-channel marketing.
Yeah, a couple of things to add on to that is you hit on one of them was touches don't have to be through email. They could be a phone call. They could be a LinkedIn outreach. You could try to find a connection through a common, overlaps in your network to try to get an introduction. So a lot of pieces that just don't have to be email, and that can help those different components to complement one another. Another thing to consider on the number of touches is the sales cycle for whatever it is you're selling to them. In our case, we're selling professional services, which in a lot of cases are very strategic. They can be high dollar spend. That's not something you can convince someone to pull the trigger on in an email or two, right? It's not like, hey, we're running a sale on socks. It really depends on what that sales cycle looks like, the decision-making process, and that should be referenced and kind of taken into consideration as well.
Yeah, even if they're showing intent for socks, they may be like, how did you know? Which kind of leads into the next question that we have, which is, what elements of the intent data should be used for the outreach? In other words, keywords, web page visits, etc. And how do you do it without being offensive or creepy? Love this question. I'll take the first stab at it. Honestly, ways that you can leverage intent data in your outreach. My personal favorite example is if you're doing the broader scope. So that very first example I gave of, okay, these are my target accounts and they're now starting to surge on things that are like me. So for Sales Intel being a B2B data organization, that would be like B2B contact data, data quality, data cleanse. If they start to show that, that's like a keyword in SEO. Just put that in the subject line, put it in your messaging. They're going to be looking for it. And it's a really easy way to still grab their attention because they're already surging on that topic without being creepy. So that's a way that you'll see some of your engagement go up in your opens. It's been really successful for us in doing that. But when it comes to other things, like if you're doing the crowdsourcing, or not crowdsourcing, but if you're using like G2 or Capterra, or like specific web page visits, it's usually good if you're talking about something around what they saw, instead of, hey, I saw you were on our page and you didn't fill out the form. What's up? That's a little hinky. That's where you're going to kind of put some people off of, instead where you could maybe send out something that has like, hey, just in case you were wondering, I noticed we have these things around our pricing. If I wanted to make sure if I answered any questions you have, there are softer ways that you can approach that. Andrew, what have you guys been doing over at Aspire?
Yes, absolutely. So we definitely want to avoid the creep factor. So we just kind of skip over the, hey, we know XYZ and just jump right into talking about the topic or the whatever offering that you've got. You just kind of skip that step. And they just kind of think, oh, what a coincidence. I was thinking about that, or we really need that. So you definitely want to kind of avoid the idea that we've been watching you and don't want to give off that impression on any front.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's the serendipity with it. because especially with consumers, like I know if I say something, or if I'm thinking about, if I'm like starting to search something, I'll start seeing ads for it. It's kind of like that. So for me personally, and this is just my opinion of it, I'm kind of used to that as a consumer. But perhaps it's also because I think about data all the time, and I think of ways of how they could possibly know that.
Yeah, and it's also a good way to leverage whatever topic or offering they're researching with the value they're looking to get on the back end of it. So there's other ways to kind of tie those different components together.
Absolutely. All right. I'm not seeing any other questions come through. Give everyone just a moment. Had some really great questions today. All right, going once, twice. All right. Well, Andrew, thanks so much for hopping on. If you guys did have some questions and we're just having some technical issues, you can reach out to us. And of course, you're going to get access to both the recording and the deck. And actually had a couple people ask for the first session. You'll also get access to that in the recap as well. So thank you all for joining and sticking with us. And hopefully we'll see you in October.